This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. It is great to see you all here. Thank you for coming out in this beautiful summer day. We are going to be doing something that's a little bit out of the ordinary. We are going to be doing a class that I give frequently based on a class that was given for years as part of the Aish Discovery series based on, you'll find out in a moment, cool story, cool backstory. And it's going to be at least 1 week. It might be 2 weeks. We gave this back in 2018. People asked me for it all the time. I went back to the recordings and the audio and video were terrible, so we're going to do it again. It's going to be amazing. So stay tuned. Okay, now, just for the record, I was giving this class. There's an organization called Heritage Retreats, which is an amazing organization. They take young Jewish men and women, young professionals, college students. They take them out to Montana. In the summer, we go hiking in Glacier National Park, which in my opinion is perhaps the crown jewel of the entire national park system. Unbelievable. And in the winter, we go snowboarding, or if you like, we can go skiing in Whitefish, Montana, which is amazing. And we have classes there. So Baruch Hashem, the founder of the program, Rabbi Mordechai Kreitenberg, invited me back in, I think, 2006, and I have not left since then. He cannot get rid of me. I'm like the neighborhood mouse. And Baruch Hashem, I don't think I missed a single men's program since I started. I was going to miss one in 2020, but then COVID came and I didn't miss anything. And there was like two that ended up getting canceled. Anyway, bottom line is, I give this class at Heritage Retreats all the time. And I always knew that it was an Aish Discovery class. Now recently, we had a brilliant rabbi as one of the rabbis presenting at Heritage Retreats named Rabbi Aaron Cutler. Or Aaron Cutler. Now you're thinking, that sounds like the very, very famous rabbi who's passed away many years ago. So there is Rabbi Aaron Cutler, the founder of the Beis Medrash Gavoa, the yeshiva of Lakewood, which is today the largest yeshiva in America, perhaps in the world, between 8,000 and 10,000 students. Absolutely brilliant, genius, fire, Torah, fire, everything. He came over from Lithuania, from the city of Kletsk. His grandson is named after him also, Aaron Cutler, Rabbi Aaron Cutler, and he was the CEO of Yeshiva Beis Medrash Gavoa for many years. He helped them grow tremendously, and now he does all kinds of work on behalf of the Jewish people. He also is an extreme adventurer. Some of the things that he's done, I wish I would do, snowmobiling through the Finlandish tundra for 3 days or whatever. Like, he's done, Baruch Hashem, a lot of crazy stuff, but he's brilliant, like his grandfather. And he was once teaching right after me, and I was giving this class. And I feel bad because I went over, because it's impossible. They give me like an hour slot for this. I'm like, this does not fit in an hour. We're going to do it at least in 2 weeks. We did it last time in 3 weeks. So I'm like, this doesn't fit in an hour. But anyway, so he's sitting there waiting for me to finish because he's the next speaker. So after I finish, I go over to him and I say, I'm so sorry. I know that you're the next speaker, and I went over my time. But, whatever. It's just like there was too much material, and I started late because the previous rabbi ended late. And he says to me, no, I'm so glad to see you did. I'm really happy that you did that. I'm like, what do you mean? Why are you really happy that I finished late and now you have to start late? He's like, no, I'm just happy to see that my material is still being used. I said, your material? He's like, yeah. I'm like, this is like famous Aish Discovery material. And he's like, and I was in Aish. Listen to this amazing story. Aaron Cutler, at the time a young man, with another person, I forgot what his name was, I believe it was Kenny something or whatever it was, they came to Rabbi Noach Weinberg, the founder of Aish Torah. And they said, we've started this amazing program called Discovery, where people travel all around America and give discovery seminars. People get all fired up, but there's nothing follow-up for them. There's no second chance or whatever. We've got to do some kind of follow-up with some more intensive material. And Rabbi Noach Weinberg, as his classic way was, he's like, that's an amazing idea, go do it. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I'm so glad you came up with a great idea, a great need, go fill it. So they said, okay, and they kind of locked themselves in an apartment for like about a month, and they came up with a ton of content, and one of them was this class. Now, I've been giving this class for decades, right, since 2006 roughly. I've been giving this class almost twice a year, at least. And then to just sit there and I meet the founder who wrote it. It was like, wow! What an amazing moment. So, if you want to know where credit is due. Credit is due to Rabbi Aaron Cutler and his co-writer, whoever, I think it was Ken something, not Ken Spiro. But in any case, so that's who this idea has come from. However, as I've been giving it for so long, each person who presents it makes it their own, and I've added my own little things, added, subtracted, and whatever it is. So I hope you enjoy the Burnham version of the Cutler Classic. All right, here we go. We are going to call this, not the 7 Wonders of Jewish History, because that's what they call it. We're going to call it, How Do You Know You're Right? All right, so let's just give a quick story. When you go to the airport, what are you thinking about? You're about to get on a flight to go to Israel. It's a 10-hour flight, a 12-hour flight. As you start driving to the airport, especially if you're in America, what do you start thinking about as you're getting closer to the airport? There's many things probably. But one of them I think about always, who am I going to be next to, right? I've had some pretty gnarly experiences, right? I've been stuck for an entire flight between a gentleman on my right who probably hadn't showered since the prehistoric era, and a gentleman on my left who was talking to himself the entire flight. Like that wasn't fun, right? So you start thinking, who am I? What's going to happen? All right, so maybe you're getting on a flight in America. You're flying from here to California, and you're sitting in your seat, and you're in the middle seat, and the aisle seat is empty, and you're really excited because just maybe you'll get that extra seat. You'll slide over to the aisle seat. You'll have enough room for your feet that they won't be shoved up against the hard plastic backrest in front of you, especially if you can put your feet on the side because there'll be an empty seat in between. And the flight's, they're about to take off. It's just a few minutes now before takeoff when suddenly this guy shows up. I'm going to give you a picture. I'm going to give you a mental picture of what he looks like, okay? He's maybe about 6'4", okay? Call it maybe 330 pounds. He's wearing a faded pair of dungarees, a faded pair of jeans, and a large, also faded green t-shirt that says, Jesus Saves. He's got, he's clean shaven, he's got a mustache and a long ponytail that's got multiple layers. You know, talking about the multi-layer ponytail with the, okay, so this is what you're dealing with. He also has a big tattoo of Jesus on the cross on his arm. I guess Jesus wasn't saved, but okay, fine. Yeah. Anyway, and in the other hand, he's holding a well-worn copy of the Holy Bible. Okay, so what you do is you immediately take out of the backrest of the seat, you take out the Delta, the Delta magazine, and suddenly you're fascinated in 3 different ways to visit the city of Buenos Aires. There's the artistic way, there's the culinary way, and you're in there. He's now in there. Forget about you having extra room for your feet. He's got at least a third of your seat, and you are busy buried in the Delta magazine when suddenly you hear him say, "Hey, I noticed you got one of those Stars of David. Are you Jewish?" And you're like, the correct answer is no. Is this a Jewish thing? Okay, here we go. And then you say, yeah, I'm Jewish. He says, can I ask you a couple questions about Judaism? Now again, the correct answer, and I really recommend, and I really mean this, is the answer is no. I'm so sorry, and here's the way you say it. You say, I'm so sorry, my mother told me not to talk about politics and religion with people I don't know. But can I just ask you, no, I got to show respect to my mom. Like, by the way, blame it on your mom, right? Blame it on your mom. Who's going to say to you, don't listen to your mother? No, for real. But you don't want to get, I'll tell you why you don't want to get into conversations with these people, because these people have certain knowledge. Everyone thinks these guys know chapter and verse, the whole Bible. They don't. But they know Isaiah 53 like the back of their hand. You never heard of Isaiah 53. You didn't even know Isaiah went to 53 chapters. So you're like, oh wow, you get impressed. So like they start quoting stuff and it looks like this guy's like a total Bible genius, and you feel like I didn't really learn this in Hebrew school. You don't know how to answer, and you start doubting yourself. So don't engage. If you're not an expert in the subject matter, do not engage with people on religion, because he's not looking to change his own opinion. He's looking to change yours. He's trying to testify, right? they get a lot of points if they convert a Jew. You know that? They get way more points if they convert a Jew than if they convert a non-Jew, for whatever reason. Maybe because we're the people that Jesus was from and rejected, whatever. Anyway, the bottom line is, so do not engage in conversations with missionaries, period, the end. You don't have the information and the knowledge. But let's say you said yes, and he says to you, he's like, look, I don't really understand why you Jews think you guys are the chosen people. I think it's an enormous amount of hubris. You guys think you're right. You like, the Christian world is so much bigger and so much more successful. Don't you see that God has rejected your people and chosen ours? Why do you still think that you're right? Now that question is a very good question. And it's a question that many, I would say most Jews don't have the answer to. The vast majority of Jews, when I teach this at Heritage Retreats to young professionals and college students, I open it up to the floor, and the vast majority of people don't really know why we're right. Why is Judaism correct? There's thousands of religions. Since the beginning of history, roughly, there have been about 5,000 major religions. We're just one of them. Why do we think we're right? Who says? And for most people, they're like, well, I don't know if we're right, but it's what my parents did, so that's what I do. But if that's the case, if your parents were serial killers, would you be a serial killer? I would hope not. It's not like it shouldn't. You're too. By the time you hit 20, you're too old to just be doing things because your father does them or your mother does them. If your father's an alcoholic, should you be an alcoholic? If your father yells and screams, should you yell and scream? No, come on, you're smart enough. You know that. At a certain point, you got to say, if I'm going to invest my life, I'm going to send my children to Hebrew school. I'm going to get my kids bar mitzvah. I'm going to get married by a rabbi. Whatever. Why? Why? And it can't just be because my parents did it. So why? How do we know we're right? Okay, that's the question we're going to try to deal with today. And what we're going to do today, there's many different answers to this. The answer that we're going to try to explore over the next couple of weeks is the idea of using history to prove that Judaism is the correct religion. And we're going to try to prove two main themes. Number one, that we are God's chosen people. And number two, that whoever wrote the Bible, the Torah, not only had knowledge over what would happen in the future, not only did they have the knowledge of what would happen in the future, but they had control over what would happen throughout world history. Okay. Now let's remember an important thing about history. In America, there is a celebration at the end of November called Thanksgiving. And if you go to the plays that the children put on in their schools, there's something about pilgrims and Native Americans, and they had a big feast together, and it was all hunky-dory. Things were amazing. Things were just amazing, right? We came to the country. The natives welcomed us with open arms. We shared our bounty with them, and they shared their bounty with us. And everything was great, and there was a lot of turkey and a lot of stuffing and a lot of football. That's probably the way it happened with William Branford. You know what I'm saying? That's probably how it all went down in the 1600s. Now, if you go to the reservations in the West, the Native American reservations, and the Native American reservations, people are living in poverty, rampant abuse of drugs, alcohol. It's really not a great situation over there. Read up on it if you'd like. Thanksgiving for them is like Tisha B'Av for us. They're like sitting on the floor mourning. They're not saying, oh, the white men came and we had this great party and we all shared of our bounty. They're like, the white men came, gave us smallpox, wiped out 90% of our population, and shoved us into the forbidding West. The Cherokee Trail of Tears. They're not celebrating this. So who's telling the story? Well, when it comes to history, the word history, as you well know, is the word his story. History. His story. That's how history is written. When I was a kid, we still learned in school, I don't know if they still teach it in school this way, that we won the Vietnam War. There are probably some kids in school learning that we won the Afghanistan War. Right? Joe Biden pronounced an incredible victory, and we pulled out of Afghanistan with great fanfare and incredible winningness. Incredible willingness. We didn't. But history is written by the conquerors because the other people are not around to write history anymore. So they write whatever stories they want. So generally, history books are subjective. The only way you could have a history book that would be the most incredible history book, the one that would be really authoritative, is if somehow that history book was written ahead of time. Could you imagine that? A book that says, this is what will happen in history. And it was true. Now, no one writes that because no one has the ability to do that. As a matter of fact, here's the fascinating thing. Like I said, there are thousands of religions. Thousands and thousands of religions. Not a single one of them has a book that tells you exactly what will happen in this world. Every one of them will promise you something when you get to kingdom come. So, in Christianity, they say if you believe in JC as your Lord and Savior, you get EB. EB. You know what EB stands for? Eternal bliss. And if you don't believe in JC as your Lord and Savior, you get ED. Eternal damnation. There you go. In Islam, if you are a proper believer in the last prophet, the Prophet Muhammad, and you fight a good jihad, you get many friends in the world to come, right? Friendly companions, young and willing. If you don't, I don't know what their version is. I mean, they'll kill you in this world, forget about the next world, right? Like they convert by the sword. That's part of their jihad. It's like, if you look at all the Muslim countries that have swords on their what do you call it, on their flags, like they're very clear. This is how we do it. You know, forget about what happens in the next one. You don't convert. Here we go. And every religion, you go to, Hinduism and Buddhism, they talk about reincarnation. You reincarnate if you do your dharma, if you do your duty, then you'll have better karma, and you're going to reincarnate to a better caste, and eventually you reincarnate all the way up, you reach nirvana, you reach this state of eternal bliss. Everyone's got different descriptions of what's going to happen in the world to come. Not a single religion tells you what's going to happen in this world. And it makes a lot of sense. If you were writing a book that you wanted to be a major religion that should stick around for years and years and years, and people should have adherence to it all over the world, if you write that things are going to happen and they don't happen, your book is gone. Do you remember that 2012 cult, like the Apocalypse 2012? You remember that? Like some kind of Aztec Mayan thing that the world is going to end in the year 2012. There was a whole thing, like their calendar ended and there's going to be some kind of apocalypse in the year 2012. And leading up to 2012, there was all kinds of buzz about it, and people were reading up about it, people were doing all kinds of things. And then 2012 came, 2012 left, nothing happened, and they're gone. No one's hearing about them anymore. If you were to write a religion book, a book of a religion, and say, this will happen, and I'm not talking about like random stuff. Like, I'll give you an example. There was someone named Nostradamus that people see as a prophet. And then after 9/11 happened, they said, oh, look, in Nostradamus it says, great towers will fall. See? He knew 9/11 because he said great towers will fall. That's pathetic. That's like so non-specific. You know what I'm saying? Like, it could apply to hundreds of times during history. But if you were to write a book and say very specifically things that are going to happen, and especially if those things that are going to happen are not happening to everybody else. Great towers fall all over the world. Throughout human history, towers have fallen. Great towers will fall. Right? But if you write very specific things that will happen to very specific people, and those things don't happen to everybody else, and those things come true, then you're extraordinarily compelling. So if people could do that, they would write the book, but they can't do that because they don't know the future of history and they can't control history, so they don't write those books. But only one religion, and only one religion, writes extraordinary things that are going to happen throughout all of history, and not only are these things incredibly rare, they don't work well together. They work against each other. And yet they all came true. So what we're going to see over this week and next week is that the way that I know that we are right is because we have a book that is different than every other religion. Our book directly describes what will happen to our people. The things that it describes are things that are happening to nobody else, and they've all come true. That's how I know that we're right. Because what we have is qualitatively different than what everybody else has. Everybody else has a book that says, you come to heaven and here's what I'll give you. Right? Like there's a politician right now in New York. His name is Mamdani. I'm sure you guys have heard plenty about him. He's the guy who's offering free transportation, free public buses, and government-run grocery stores. That sounds like a great thing. I would just love the government to take care of my groceries for me because they're so good at everything else they do, right? So he's promising, rent freezes and free busing and free. It sounds almost like a religion, right? I promise you all kinds of things. Now you don't ever see them, but you got to believe. You got to believe. Okay? So every religion in the world promises all kinds of things in the world to come. And our book does the exact opposite. 5,000 religions, 4,999 of them tell you what you're going to get in the world to come. Well, one, and only one, says this is what's going to happen to you in this world. As a matter of fact, it doesn't even tell you in the 5 books of Moses or in the books of the prophets anything about what's going to happen in the world to come. It doesn't say a word about it. The Chovos HaLevavos, the duties of the heart, written by Rabbeinu Bachya ibn Pekuda, he goes through 7 different reasons why he does not talk about the world to come in the Torah. But it doesn't. It only tells you what's going to happen in this world. And one of the reasons could be that it's not provable. Okay. And that's why, my friends, the Torah does not want you necessarily to study music. You could, if you're musically inclined. You want to learn to play the piano? Go right ahead. The Torah's all for it. You want to learn how to play the harpsichord, the xylophone? B'vakasha. Torah doesn't tell you to learn how to play music. The Torah does not tell you to study biology. You might be fascinated by biology, and I hope if you study biology, you study it with appropriate eyesight, and then you just see, while you're studying biology, miracles, 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 and you become a man of great faith by studying biology, but you're not required to study biology. You're not required to study chemistry or astrology. You're not required to study economics. You're not required to study any field of study, but the Torah does tell you to study history, because that's going to shore up your faith. And that's source number 1 in your source sheets. In Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 7, says the Torah, Zechor Yemos Olam. Remember the days of old. It's a command. Remember the days of old. Binu shnos dor vador. Understand the meaning of each generation. Shal avicha v'yagedcha zikeinecha v'yom relach. Ask your father, and he shall instruct you. Your elders, and they shall tell you. Learn history, says God. Why? Because when you learn history, you will know that we are right. It's that simple. Learn history and know that we are right as the Jews. We're not the only people to recognize this. Throughout history, many other people who are non-Jewish recognize this. Louis XIV, of course, famous for his incredible gustatory delights, his 180-day parties, absolute party animal. He had a court philosopher named Pascal, very famous French philosopher, Pascal. And one day, he's about to start one of his big 180-day debauchery feasts, and suddenly he's like, wait a second, I'm kind of wondering, is there a God? Is there no God? So he calls over Pascal and he says, look, Pascal, I don't got a lot of time. Prove to me the existence of God in 1 sentence or less. And Pascal looks at the king and says, the Jews, your majesty, the Jews. Just look at the Jews and you know that there's a God. That's Pascal, a non-Jewish French philosopher, Christian. Mark Twain. Mark Twain was a massive philo-Semite, right? We have something called an anti-Semite, people who hate Jews, of which there are many. But there's also something called a philo-Semite. In America, we have a lot of those. The word philo means something you love. Like an audiophile, someone who loves quality audio, right? So the prefix or suffix phile represents something that you love. An oenophile is someone who likes good wine. A philo-Semite is someone who loves the Jews. Mark Twain was one of those. And he actually travels to Israel. We'll get back to that later, next week, or maybe the week after. But he wrote the following about the Jewish people in the magazine called Harper's Magazine. And he wrote this in 1899. I'm going to read to you. This is source number 2. If the statistics are right, the Jews constitute but 1% of the human race. It suggests a nebulous, dim puff of stardust lost in the blaze of the Milky Way. Properly, the Jew ought hardly to be heard of. But he is heard of, has always been heard of. He is as prominent on the planet as any other people, and his commercial importance is extravagantly out of proportion to the smallness of his bulk. His contributions to the world's list of great names in literature, science, art, music, finance, medicine, and abstruse learning are also way out of proportion to the weakness of his numbers. He has made a marvelous fight in the world in all the ages and has done it with his hands tied behind him. He could be vain of himself and be excused for it. The Egyptian, the Babylonian, the Persian rose, filled the planet with sound and splendor, then faded to dream stuff and passed away. The Greek and the Roman followed and made a vast noise, and they are gone. Other peoples have sprung up and held their torch high for a time, but it burned out, and they sit in twilight now, or have vanished. The Jew saw them all, beat them all, and is now what he always was, exhibiting no decadence, no infirmities of age, no weakening of his parts, no slowing of his energies, no dulling of his alert and aggressive mind. All things are mortal, but the Jew. All other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality? So this is another non-Jew recognizing that we look at the world of history and we see there's just something unique about the Jew. And now let's get into the 7 wonders of Jewish history. Let's get into the 7 things that the Torah said are going to happen, things that don't happen to everybody, things that only happen to us or a very, very small percentage of peoples, and happen to us as it was predicted in this book, this history book that was written before history happened. Here we go. The first idea is the concept of an eternal nation. How long are we around? Well, we were first promised to Abraham, right, about 3,700 years ago. And ever since then, we've been around. So we're about 3,700 years old. There's different ways of counting when Judaism officially started. Some people count it at Abraham. The beginning, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, the patriarchs and matriarchs of the Jewish people. And that starts about 3,700 years ago. There are some people who start from the moment of the Exodus and Mount Sinai, which happened about 3,338 years ago. There's different ways of calculating it, but we've been around for quite a while. Who else can you name who's been around for that long? Who's been around for 3,500 years? Can anybody tell me? Anybody? All right, I'll give you a few. You ready? The Zoroastrians. Okay, the Zoroastrians are an ancient religion from the area that is Persia. And they're very small in number, but there still are Zoroastrians around today. Okay? Perhaps the Aborigines in Australia. Now, when you say the Native Americans, we'll get to them in a second actually. Hinduism. Hinduism was a mixture of 2 cultures, the Aryans and the Dravidians, 2 distinctive groups that kind of melded into each other in this area of the world on the Indian subcontinent known as the Deccan Plateau. And their customs evolved and they kind of morphed into this people known as the Hindus. They're about 3,500 years old. Now, let's talk about the Native Americans for a moment, because my wife and I one time went to the Grand Canyon. Now, there's a couple different parts of the Grand Canyon. There's the Grand Canyon National Park. It's a national park. How much does it cost to get into National Park? Does anybody know?
Nothing. We have a senior pass.
You have a senior pass. There we go. Okay. So I think parking is usually $28 for a single day, $35 for the week, or you can get the National Pass. I believe I have one. I don't think it's here in my pocket. You can get a National Pass for a year where you can come into all the parks for a year for about $105. Okay? You got the fellows there with their Sequoia hats and, you know. Okay, great, great. That's the national park. And otherwise, once you pay for parking, everything else is free, right? So parking you pay for, again, $28, $35, $100 for the year. Everything else is free. But there is another part of the Grand Canyon, and that's on Native American land. And the reason why it gets a lot of visitors is because it's very close to the airport in Las Vegas. It's the closest one to the airport. And therefore, a lot of people just want to get out there. So my wife and I, we have been traveling through, and we said, let's go see the Grand Canyon. So we get onto the Native American land, and as we get onto the land, they charge us $35, right, to get in. Okay, fair enough. At the entrance, the same way you have at the entrance of a national park. But then they charge us $35 more to get into the parking lot. What are the first? Okay, whatever. Then they require you to take a bus from the parking lot to the rim, right? Which is crazy because it's a walk. It's literally like a 2-minute hike. But they require you to take a bus. And guess how much the bus charges? $35 times 2, me and my wife. And then, ladies and gentlemen, and if you get nothing else out of this class other than this, let me save you some money. There is this glass arch, like a walkway, that is supposed to be, it's like a half-moon walkway that says it's 6,000 feet above the canyon floor. And you can pay, guess how much? $35 to go on this walkway, right? And then you should be able to look down and see 6,000 feet into the floor of the canyon, which would be pretty amazing. It's a scam. I'll explain to you why. Here is the rim of a canyon. The canyon goes down like this. It slopes down all the way to the middle. The bottom of the canyon, which is 6,000 feet below the top of the canyon, is a very, very narrow slot canyon. When you are at the top of the canyon and you look directly down, you're seeing maybe 700 feet down. Because remember, the canyon slopes down and gets smaller and smaller as it goes. So when you go out on that glass rainbow that you paid $35 a person, and you look down, you don't see 6,000 feet down to the end of the canyon. You see until like the wall turns in on itself and it's about 700 feet. Don't do it. Don't waste the money. So we're a little bit disgruntled, my wife and I, and we're going back to our car. And the parking lot, the security guys are from this nation. I forgot which nation it was. I don't want to say Lashon Hara about any particular Native American nation anyway. So I say to the guy, I said, let me ask you a question, by the way. I said, how long have you guys been here? Here at the Grand Canyon. And he says to me, 35,000 years. Now, first of all, I finally understand why everything's 35,000. If you go back in 1,000 years, everything's going to cost $36, right? Okay. So he says 35,000 years. I said, that's amazing. Wow. Do you guys have any evidence? Like, do you have pottery? Do you have any? Is there any evidence that you guys have been here for 35,000 years? And he says, no, but we've just been here for 35,000 years. Okay. All right. Now, the reality is, if you actually read the history of Native American tribes, there was no Native American tribe that was ever anywhere for 35,000 years or 3,500 years or even 1,000 years. They were constantly warring with each other, killing each other, taking over each other. There's like this mythology that they were all like these peaceful, happy people living in total like bountific, beautiful, peace and serenity. And then the Americans came, the white man came along and started giving them smallpox and turning them into, making war on the continent in a place that was just all rainbows before. It's baloney. They were murdering each other. They were constantly, if you read up on the history of Native American tribes, they were always subsuming. So there was no tribe that really lasted longer than like 500 years. But let's assume right now that these guys were there for 35,000 years. So how many nations have been around the same time as the Jews? You got the Zoroastrians. You've got the Aborigines, which were so separated out in the middle of Australia that perhaps that was like one more unified group. I don't know, but let's assume the Aborigines, let's assume the Hindus, and the Native American tribe were the security guard by the Grand Canyon. That's 4 different groups. And then the Jews. There's 5 groups. How many religions have there been, major religious branches, over the last couple thousand years? About 5,000. What is the ratio of 5 out of 5,000? What's the percentage? Anyone good at math over here? Come on, Jews. Okay. Anybody? 0.1%. Very good. 0.1%. So 0.1% of nations have lasted 3,500 years, which means that 99.9% don't last. If you're writing a book and you want to make a prediction that's going to stand the test of time, the one thing you don't want to say is this particular group of people is going to be here forever, because 99.9% of people are not going to make it. But yet, that's what the book says, that we're going to be this eternal nation. Let's see it inside. Source number 3, Genesis 17:7. God is speaking to Abraham. And he says, and I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you throughout their generations, an eternal covenant, to be your God and the God of your descendants after you. God says, I'm making an eternal, unbreakable covenant with you and your children, Abraham. And we see this come up again in Leviticus. God says, in the time when he's talking bad about what's going to happen, punishments that are going to happen to the Jewish people, God says, yet even so, even while they are in their enemy's land, I will not reject or spurn them, lest by wiping them out I make void my covenant with them, for I am their God. I will remember them because of the covenant I made with their forefathers, whom I brought out of the land of Egypt under the very eyes of the Gentiles, that I might be their God. I can't wipe them out, even when they're doing terrible things. Even when I send them into exile, I cannot reject and spurn them entirely, because I made a covenant with their forefathers that they would be an eternal nation. I'm not letting them go. Continues, Malachi 3:6, Malachi. Ki ani Hashem lo shanisi. I am God, I don't change. V'ata b'nei Yaakov lo kilisem. And you are the children of Yaakov. You will not cease to be. Again and again and again throughout the Torah and the Nevi'im, Hashem is telling us, you are here forever. Furthermore, the final one, this is the most amazing one. Isaiah 59:21, and I'll tell you why it's the most amazing one in a moment. V'ani zos brisi osam amar Hashem, and for me, this is my covenant with them, says Hashem. Ruchi asher alecha, my spirit that is upon you, udvarai asher samti beficha, and the words that I put in your mouth, lo yamushu mipicha mipi zaracha mipi zera zaracha amar Hashem me'ata v'ad olam. These words shall not depart from your mouth, or the mouth of your children, or the mouth of your children's children, says God, from now to all eternity. Not only does God say you will for sure be here, he says I can even tell you what you will be doing. You will be speaking these same words that I put in your mouth. And look at that, 3,700 plus years since God made that covenant with Abraham, we are still here despite every nation in the world trying to wipe us out, and we're still doing what he said we're doing. We're speaking the words that he put into our mouth. Is that crazy? Not only are we here, he said you're going to be here and you're going to do this. We are here. We are doing this. Right now, we're doing this. Unbelievable. Okay. 99.9% of peoples don't make it. We've made it. That's number one, the idea of an eternal nation. Okay, so we got to figure out, how are you going to be an eternal nation? So let's look at the Aborigines. The Aborigines are the natives of Australia. Australia was the most remote continent until Europeans got there. It was really just left alone for thousands of years of history. So it's no surprise that the people who lived on it were able to stay around for a long time. Now again, we don't know their tribes, their religions, how they changed. We don't really have a great record of it. But let's assume they kept it, because it'd be easy. You're all by yourself in a corner of the world. Everyone's leaving you alone. Things are good. So you can sometimes keep something going for thousands of years just because there's no natural challenge to it. So they had a strong homeland. Even the Chinese, some people say the Han Chinese are an example of an eternal nation. But if you actually read the Manchus came and overran, remember that whole wall they built? Yeah, that didn't work. The Manchus came right through it, the Mongols came right through it, and they overtook the entire country and ruled it for hundreds of years in dynasties. So everything was what we call famished, a little bit mixed up, shall we call it. But the reality, the Chinese, they have this massive, massive country, and for many years, they walled themselves off from the world. It was called the Middle Kingdom, and they just walled themselves off. We don't want to deal with the world. It wasn't until the American Navy came and basically forced them to trade under Commodore Perry, right? So they had no interest in the world. They kind of said, we're not interested in you. You stay out of our business. We'll stay out of your business, right? There was no Temu. There was no Alibaba, no AliExpress, no Tencent, right? No TikTok. They kept in their own lane, and they said, you guys leave us alone, we'll leave you alone. Okay, maybe if you're your own country and you stay there for a long time, you could be an eternal nation. But the Torah says that something's going to happen to the Jewish people. That's a very rare phenomenon in all of history, and that thing is called an exile. What is an exile? And it's very important that we define the word exile first. An exile is when a nation comes in and conquers your land and then takes the entire native population, picks them up, and throws them out. Now, why is that rare in history? Because usually when you are trying to build an empire and you're taking ground, right? You're conquering countries and cities. What do you want? You want those people to now become part of your empire. You want them to send you tribute. You'll say, okay, this country, we just conquered, Turkey. Turkey, every year you need to send to the empire headquarters, 5,000 tons of gold and 300,000 trunks of wood or whatever. We want logs. We want food. We want wheat. We want resources. We want gold. We want slaves. We make a whole list of shopping list of what you guys got to send us, and we want you there. You pay us the taxes. You pay us the things we want. If we kick you out, then what do we get? The whole country's sitting there unproductive. So throughout human history, the concept of exile is exceedingly rare. Again, exile is defined as when you come in, take over a place, and kick out all the natives. Can anybody here name me any exiles in history? Any exiles in human history besides the Jews? So I'll give you one. This is what happened right here in America. The Cherokee Trail of Tears. Right? The Americans did come, and we took the natives, and we literally wholesale threw them out of their land. We didn't want them to give us tribute. We wanted their land. We didn't want them to send us corn and logs and whatever. We wanted to make our own farms and make our own corn. So that's an example of an exile. Here's another exile. In the Carthaginian Wars, there was a set of wars known as the Punic Wars. The Punic Wars between Rome and a city called Carthage. Carthage is just below Rome on the North African shore. And at one point, it was a very, very successful, thriving city and civilization. They got into wars with Rome. So Rome and Carthage were like right across the Mediterranean from each other. They had a bunch of wars. And at one point, Carthage was very successful, and they burned down Rome. So when Rome came back, there was like 3 Punic Wars. When the final Punic War came, Rome won that one. They literally kicked everybody out of Carthage. They plowed over the entire place with salt so they could never support human life again. That's an exile. They picked up everybody who lived there, threw them out of there, and made sure that nobody would ever settle in the city of Carthage again. That's an example. It's extreme revenge. What other exiles are there in history? Can you name me any? Okay. Now there might be a few more. We're not going to get into Armenians, perhaps. We're not going to get into those right now. That was more of a genocide, Armenian genocide. You can read up about that if you'd like. Nobody in history has been exiled twice, that's for sure. Because if you were exiled once, you were done. Nobody in history has been exiled twice. The book that says that we're going to be an eternal nation, which makes a lot of sense if we have some place that we could live securely and quietly, also says you're going to be exiled. And you're not only going to be exiled once, you're going to be exiled twice. The Babylonians destroyed our temple, literally took the land of Israel and emptied it out like a sweep, emptying out dust and cobwebs from the corners of a house. And about 490 years later, the Romans came and did the same thing, deporting almost the entire population of Israel, selling them at slaves markets to the point where the slave market was depressed for 20 years because there were so many Jewish slaves being sold all over the world. So the same book that says we're going to be around forever says that it would make sense if we could have our own little homeland, leave us alone. But no, it says your homeland's going to be invaded and you're going to be thrown out, sent all over the world. Okay, let's see that. Here we go. In your sources, let's look at source number 4. There's 2 very different exiles. One described in the book of Leviticus and one described in the book of Deuteronomy. One's describing the Babylonian exile. One's describing the Roman exile. Here we go. We have sources for each one. Leviticus 26:33. And you, I will scatter you among the nations, and I will unsheathe the sword after you. Your land will be desolate, and your cities will be a ruin. That's in Leviticus. In Deuteronomy, next one, you will be torn from the land which you are about to occupy, and God shall scatter you among all the people from one end of the earth to the other. Furthermore, Ezekiel. Now they're already living in Israel, and Ezekiel's coming to warn them. Remember what God said in Leviticus? It's about to happen. Ezekiel says, then I shall scatter you among the nations and disperse you over foreign lands. Now, we know for sure we've been exiled. That's for sure. Have we been dispersed across all foreign lands? Well, let's see. I'm going to read to you right now from a book by a historian named Lejinsky. The book is called The Jewish Dispersion. Again, remember, the prophecy was that we would be dispersed across all the lands. Now, this book was written probably about 60, 70 years ago, so just take that in mind when you see the years that we have over here. As a result of the relentless persecutions and forced expulsions, most Jews are but recent newcomers to their respective lands of residence. 90% of the Jewish people have lived in their new homes for no more than 100 years. The majority of the large Jewish settlements date back no more than 50 or 60 years. Right? Again, this book is written about 75 years ago, maybe written in the 1950s. So most Jews have gotten to America, for example, in the late 1800s. That's when it started, into the 1900s. So the majority of Jewish settlements date back no more than 50 or 60 years. 75% of Jewry has thus been displaced in 3 lands, Israel, America, and Russia, while the remaining 25% are dispersed throughout over 100 lands on all 5 continents. Right? Everywhere. Truly, truly everywhere. How do you tell people that they're going to last forever, but they'll have no homeland? How do you retain your eternality if you have no homeland? All right. More about that next week. How about that? Okay. All right. Well, thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being awesome.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.